Hello again. Well, I got I had that itsy bitsy M4 with the random program on it. It was displaying the bias as a color, and it wasn't behaving like if I just left it alone. It wasn't behaving very nicely because it would just wander into very biased towards ones, and then after 10 minutes it would reset, and then it would wander again, and maybe it'll wander to very biased towards zeros, and then after 10 minutes it would reset. So I thought, well, this is just an unstable random number generator. But then, I talked about it to a friend of mine at lunch, and then when I got home I started to think about it, and I realized I was actually probably computing the bias incorrectly, because all I was doing was take a bias variable and set it to 0. And then every time I get a 1, add 1 to that bias. Every time I get a 0, subtract 1 from the bias. Well, that's kind of like bias, except that let's say I draw 100 samples, and after drawing 100 samples, that bias variable is 50. Wow, that's very biased. So it would naturally be good to color it towards the red. But hey, wait a minute. What if I draw like 10,000 samples, and that bias variable is 50? Well, now wait a minute. Now we're only 50 more out of 10,000 samples. I shouldn't give it the same color. It should be that's actually not very biased. So I realized that the bias, I had this wrong, and I should do something more like a percentage to keep track of the bias of the random number generator. The other thing that I did was I wanted to keep track of only the recent history of the generator. So in Python, which someday I might post this all on GitHub. It's not really complicated code, but in Python, what I did was I created a queue. CircuitPython doesn't seem to have a queue class. So I just created a little random queue class. And what it does is you add samples to it, and then, up to a certain size, and then the samples start dropping off. And so what it means is I'm keeping track of, in order, the last, I think I had the last 500 samples. So at 0.2 seconds per sample, you can figure out how many seconds of samples I'm keeping. So that's streaming through. And then I compute a bias. So I keep track of how many in that set, how many more ones than zeros with a bias, either positive or negative. Okay. And then, but I divide that by the number of samples so that I get a percentage. Okay. So what percent biased, and what to the ones, and what percent biased to the zeros. And then I take that number and display it as a color, where 0 is green, and then, as I said before, 100% would be red, and negative 100% would be blue. Well, so I let that run for a while, and it just stays solid green. And if you look at the numbers coming out of it, it was wandering, but very close to 0. So there's some wandering going on in there. So I thought, hey, this is good. This says that this random number generator is stable, at least according to now my new definition of what a random number generator bias is. And so I said, but I want to see that little bit of wandering in the display. So I took that number, and after I compute the bias as I described, and then I multiply it by, I think, 10 to stretch it. So to stretch it across my color sweep. So now multiplied by 10, I can see that occasionally it wanders a little bit towards the red, towards the blue. Okay, so it's going a little blue green, it's going a little yellow, and it does this. So I let that run for a while, and every once in a while I look at it and it's green, and I'm like, yeah, that's right, okay. But then every once in a while it's a little yellow or it's a little blue green, and I'm like, okay, well, it's in that little swinging kind of range, okay. And then I have one other data point. We went out for several hours, and when I came back, it was solid green. So, take that for whatever that might mean. But with no one in the house, it was probably solid green. Okay, so I still think I need to do more analysis of this generator and what's going on with the bias. So I have an Adafruit, another plug for Adafruit. I have no connection. And I have a little Adafruit SD card module that I could attach to this itsy bitsy. And I want to record to a file the bias, taking every, now, I don't know, I have a pretty big little SD card on it. So I'll take samples and see how long I can take samples and just record them to a file so that I can get a graphical representation of the bias, so I can do some better analysis of what's going on. So that's one thing. That's just going to take a few jumper wires to throw on there to jumper the two parts together. I do have to check to see if the power supply on the itsy bitsy, if the voltage regulator can handle driving that that module. I think it can, because I think Adafruit has an example where they wire it directly to its power. It's 3.3 volt power pin. So, but here's the other more spooky thing, okay? Then I tried to say, okay, now can I use my mind to influence this thing? And now we're going to get into how can you possibly design an experiment for, can your mind control a random number generator? I mean, how could you do it? What I did was I just looked at it, and it's sitting there and it's wandering. And then I just say in my mind, more red, and then I would think, I could think, okay, I'm in the transistor and or diode, whatever, I'm blocking the electrons. Okay, that'll make it more blue. Or I'm allowing more electrons to flow. Whatever, I did whatever. And it would appear to do what I was trying to make it do. If I was thinking more red, more ones, more electrons, it would wander and get to red. And then if I was thinking more blue, eventually it would wander and get to blue. So here's the thing. I am biased, right? So I am deciding how long to try to do this. So let's say this thing is just randomly swinging, and I persist until it gets to what I'm asking for, right? So that's me entering my bias into this very not experiment, right? So I need to design an experiment where I control that, where I have, let's say, a specific amount of time that I apply the thoughts. So I need to design an experiment where I remove my bias. So one thing also that I did, because it's not really clear, when you're looking at an RGB pixel, what's the color. So I took the little heartbeat LED, and I have it so that when it's green, now I have it so that when it's green, it's beating on and off with a duty cycle of 1 second on, 1 second off. And when it becomes more red or more blue, depending on how much more, it beats faster and faster. So that if it was solid red or solid blue, it would beat at the 0.2 seconds. So 0.2 seconds on, 0.2 seconds off. And so that would be an indicator so that while you're looking at it, to know, are you actually moving it? Because it's hard to see color differences unless you're really good at color. So, so that aside, now, what would an experiment look like? Well, it would have to have a fixed. Oh, one other thing I want to say: when I did those little informal experiments, it never went the opposite way than what I wanted. So, if I'm trying to make it blue, it might swing a little yellow, but it would go blue. It would never go red. Okay, so when I was trying to make it go red, it would swing a little towards red and a little back, a little towards red, a little back. It would never swing all the way to blue. It would eventually swing to red. So that, I'm a believer, right? So I want this to work. So, I guess that's unscientific, but I'm believing other people's experimental results. So, again, I have to remove this bias from it. Now, one way to do it is to have someone else be the subject. So that's number one, get someone else to be the subject. But we would need multiple subjects who have some who believe it might work, some who believe it might not work, in order to remove that tendency from the results. Also, so back on track. Only allow a certain amount of time for a result. That's number one. Number two, the color and now the blinking is feedback to the subject, but should not be used as the experimental measurement, because I can't quantify it. But I do have a quantity, and that's the bias that I'm printing out. So collect the actual numerical bias, okay, and into a file. And so I would have a thing where I say I mark the file. I'm starting, or let's say let the bias run. I'm starting. I have so much time. It's completed, and then I have a window in which I can look at what actually happened to the bias numerically. So don't use, where I'm a person, I use the color and I say, I did it. It's more objective to use the numerical values, right? Another thing, number three, would be I am picking right now, in the ones where I say I've been successful, I am picking the direction that I want to go in, right? Well, suppose I'm just very good. Like I'm watching this thing, right? I'm watching it sit there and I'm watching it wander, right? And then I say, now I want it to go red. Well, maybe I'm just very good at looking at its recent tendencies. And it's like tending towards red. So I say, I want it to go red, and it's tending towards blue. I say, I want it to go blue without even knowing that I'm doing that, just subconsciously, right? So in order to remove that kind of bias out of this bias experiment, I would have yet another random number generator just on a computer, another computer, that is telling me which to go for. So uh, so it'll pick. So I will be told which to go for. I will be told start now, and I will be told stop now. And that's I think that's it for now for the experiment. So I thought I had one more little thing that would make the experiment better, but I'm gonna just leave it at that. If I think about it, I'll add it into the description. But so that's the state of the experiment. Oh, by the way, this video was quite a bit delayed because my computer just completely, my laptop, it completely died. It died deader than dead, and it took a couple days to get a new one. I had to order it, and then it took forever. I had a backup from 2 weeks ago, and so it took a long time for it to load the backup because it was off a slow USB 3 drive, and the new laptop is USB-C. So I lost a couple weeks of stuff. Some of the videos that I was in progress are still on my phone. Some of the software, luckily, the Itsy Bitsy software, well, that's Python code sitting on the Itsy Bitsy. So I was able to recover that from off the Itsy Bitsy. Some of the C++ stuff, though, that I did for other boards, it's just gone. So I'd have to do it all over again. My other little things that I'm not even making videos on that I was working on. So now I've got a nice new laptop, and it's a nice fast laptop. So it's going to make it easier to format these videos and stuff like that. Maybe do some more special effects and stuff. So anyways, that's a little bit more of my status. So thank you. I see that there is interest in this area, this topic area. So I've gotten some comments, and I appreciate them. And I hope this video was informative and maybe even entertaining. And I'll see you on the next video.